Russia's invasion of Ukraine has reached a milestone now lasting longer than Soviet Union's war against Nazi Germany. Putin faces major strategic setbacks abroad, with Moscow unable to stop US from seizing Russian tankers. What does this milestone mean for the war, and how did Putin lose his allies on the global stage? Russia fired a rare Oreshnik missile at western Ukraine in what analysts say was a political warning rather than a military attack. According to Bloomberg, missile attack struck near Lviv, but it carried no explosives and did not hit any major target. Ukrainian officials said it caused some damage to building and infrastructure, but there were no casualties. Experts say the strike was meant to intimidate Ukraine and Western allies. Bloomberg reports the strike comes after a series of strategic setbacks for Russia abroad. This include increased Western support for Ukraine, including weapons and potential troop commitments in case of ceasefire, the US capture of Russian-linked oil tanker and other assets, challenges in diplomatic negotiations, including efforts by Europeans to shape a ceasefire or security guarantees for Ukraine. These setbacks have limited Russia's influence globally, and experts say the missile launch was a signal of strength to show that Moscow can still act decisively and project power even facing diplomatic losses abroad. The Orashnik missile is a hypersonic intermediate-range weapon. It can fly at extremely high speeds, it's hard to intercept, and could carry nuclear or conventional warheads. Bloomberg emphasized that its deployment is more about signaling than causing destruction, making it a tool of strategic coercion. Analysts told Bloomberg that Russia chose this missile strike to remind the West that it still has advanced weapons despite recent setbacks. Using a high-profile weapon near NATO territory sends a message that Russia can respond to challenges globally and wants to influence diplomatic negotiations. Bloomberg notes that Ukraine rejected Russia's claims that the strike was retaliation for the drone attack on Putin's residence. European leaders condemned the launch as provocative, highlighting that missile was fired close to NATO borders. The strike demonstrates how Russia is using psychological warfare, even without explosives. The missile serves as warning, showing Moscow's capability and resolve while limiting the risk of escalation. In summary, Bloomberg frames the Oreshnik missile as a calculated response to Russia's recent international setbacks.
If you could kidnap one world leader, who would it be?
Oh, I'd take Putin into custody, hold him account for these war crimes.
The statement by the UK Secretary of Defense that he would take Putin into custody and hold him accountable for war crimes sounds strong and appropriate. However, these words are not followed by concrete action. At present, there is no real pressure on Putin commensurate with the crimes he is accused of. Despite an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court, he continues to travel freely, receive foreign leaders, conduct negotiations, and direct the war. In this case, international law appears not as an instrument of accountability, but as a declaration of intent. For years, Western countries have limited their response to statements, sanctions packages, and expressions of deep concern. Meanwhile, Putin continues to kill and rape Ukrainians, subject them to brutality and abuse, while the world watches. Today, the Russian terrorist is literally attempting to freeze Ukraine. Russians continue to wage a campaign of terror against Ukraine's energy system. Russian forces deliberately waited for the onset of cold weather to intensify strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Over the past week, more than 2,000 munitions have been fired at Ukrainian populated areas, including aerial bombs and an Oreshnik missile. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported that nearly 1,000 residential buildings in the capital have remained without heating for the third consecutive day.
Meanwhile, when President Trump openly challenged Russian dictator Vladimir Putin over U.S. action in Venezuela, many expected a sharp response from the Kremlin. Instead, Putin stayed silent. According to New York Times, that silence was not accidental, it was calculated. The main reason is that Putin is focused on Ukraine, entirely on Russia's war in Ukraine, which Kremlin sees as central to Russia's future. Analysts quoted by Times say Putin views Ukraine as the conflict that will shape Russia's standing in the world. Publicly clashing with the US over Venezuela could damage Russia's position in negotiations and risks more pressure from US. For Putin, the cost of speaking out outweighed any benefit, while Russia has long backed Venezuela through weapon sales and diplomatic support. Times knows that Moscow has limited ability to challenge US power abroad. Russia does not have the military capacity to interfere with US operation in Latin America. Much of its relation with Venezuela was symbolic, not backed by strong presence. That reality became clear when US-sized Russian-linked oil tanker connected to Venezuela. Russia's foreign minister protested, but Putin himself remained silent. The New York Times places Putin's silence in a broader context of shrinking Russian influence abroad. Russia's position has weakened in recent years, including setbacks in the Middle East and reduced influence in former Soviet regions. Venezuela had been one of Moscow's few remaining partners outside Europe, but even that alliance proved shallow when US forces acted without serious Russian pushback. Analysts say this shows Russia is now more of a regional power than a global one, with limited ability to shape global events and to risk direct confrontation with the US. Another factor is diplomacy. Putin appears intent on keeping communication with Trump, especially because US plays a key role in sanctions policy. By staying quiet, Putin avoids further tensions that could complicate negotiations over Ukraine. The Times suggests that silence in this case may be a diplomatic tactic rather than a sign of his weakness. The episode also reflects an old reality. Major powers often avoid direct challenges in regions seen as another country of sphere of influence. Latin America has long been viewed by US as its own backyard. From Moscow's perspective, confronting US there would be costly and unlikely to succeed. Taken together, the New York Times analysis says Putin's muted response sends messages. Ukraine remains Russia's top priority. Russia's global military reach is constrained. Silence can be a strategic choice. Moscow's ability to influence distant events is no longer guaranteed. Putin's response shows a more cautious Russian foreign policy, one focused on protecting core interests rather than picking symbolic fight. Russia's so-called war against Ukraine, which Moscow initially described as a short operation, has now lasted longer than the Soviet Union's war against Nazi Germany in World War II, according to media reports. At the start of the invasion on February 24, 2022, Russian leaders suggested the operation would be swift, with Kyiv expected to fall within days. Some Russian commentators even floated the idea of three-day capture of Ukraine, a narrative widely circulated but never officially confirmed by the Kremlin. Instead, Ukrainian forces mounted strong resistance, halting the advance near the capital and forcing Russians to retreat. Western allies say the milestone underscores Russia's major strategic setbacks abroad. Recent examples include US seizure of Russian-linked assets and increased Western support for Ukraine. The comparison to Second World War is both symbolic and ironic. Analysts argue the war demonstrates both the stiff Ukrainian resistance and the Kremlin's inability to project power, marking a major setback for Russia globally.
The mayor of Kyiv showcased the heroic work of municipal services that are bringing the city back to life and expressed his gratitude to them. Utility workers are restoring infrastructure damaged as a result of enemy attacks. To restore heating to Kyiv residents' homes as quickly as possible, work continues both day and night.
We are currently at one of Kiev's infrastructure facilities that has been damaged. Our utility workers are working around the clock, day and night, to repair the damage and restore heating. It is difficult and complex work. I want to sincerely thank them for the effort they are putting in under the extremely low temperatures currently affecting our city. There is a great deal of work to be done, but we are committed and confident that we will overcome these challenges.
Thanks to our utility workers who operate around the clock, under shelling, after the attacks, in conditions of severe staff shortages when each worker has to do the job of two specialists. Snow and ice have appeared inside Kyiv apartments. Residents of the city have been without heating for more than 3 days. Today, forecasters predict temperatures as low as minus 21 degrees.
Видно его?
And when a minister says, "I would arrest Putin," a simple question arises: why is this not happening? Why is a person subject to an ICC arrest warrant not fully diplomatically isolated? Why have all avenues for his international legitimacy not been shut down? And why have frozen assets still not been confiscated?
If you could kidnap one world leader, who would it be?
Oh, I'd take Putin into custody, hold him account for these war crimes, hold him account for what I saw in Bucha on one of my first visits to Ukraine, and for the abduction of some of the Ukrainian kids that I met in Bilan.
Genuinely thought you were going to dodge that question, you absolute legend.
Europe, the United States, make sure you never have a Bucha on your soil. Don't later say that you didn't know or didn't expect it. We have already shown you what impunity leads to. Bucha was not an accident or an isolated incident. It is the result of weak decisions, delayed sanctions, and the fear to call evil what it is. While you limit yourselves to statements, the war continues. While you weigh the risks, people are dying. Today it is in Ukraine. Tomorrow, it could be anywhere if terror is not stopped now. Don't wait for evil to come to you. Stop it where it is already killing. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.